The summer of 1989 was supposed to be the summer I finally became myself. I was 17 years old, standing on the precipice of everything, convinced that the small town of Waverly Falls, Oregon couldn't hold me much longer. But there was something waiting for me that summer, something that would crack open every belief I held about family, about love, about the very nature of truth itself. Something that began with a name I'd never heard spoken aloud in my grandmother's house. Mary Hague Kelly. 3 words that would unravel 20 years of carefully constructed lies and reveal a secret so devastating that it would change not just my life, but the lives of everyone I thought I knew. Before I tell you what happened, before I take you into the darkness of that summer, I need you to understand something. I survived. But survival came at a price I'm still paying today. If you're watching this right now, you're exactly where you need to be. But I'm going to ask you something before we go any further. Hit that subscribe button. Share this story. Not because I want the numbers, but because somewhere out there, someone else is carrying a family secret that's crushing them, and they need to know they're not alone. Do it now, before you forget. This story is too important to keep to yourself. I grew up believing I was an only child. My mother, Diana, raised me in a small apartment above a hardware store in downtown Portland. She worked 2 jobs, waitressing at Mel's Diner during the day and cleaning offices at night. I rarely saw her, but when I did, she was tired, distracted, always looking over her shoulder like she was waiting for something terrible to find us. I never questioned it. That was just who she was. That was just our life. My father was a ghost. A photograph tucked into the back of my mother's jewelry box. A young man with dark hair and a crooked smile, wearing a military uniform. He died before you were born, my mother would say whenever I asked. He was a hero. That was all she'd give me. No name, no details, no stories of their love or how they met. Just silence and the faint smell of cigarette smoke that clung to her clothes when she came home at 2 in the morning. Every summer, I was shipped off to my grandmother's house in Waverly Falls. Margaret Hague was a formidable woman, tall, silver-haired, with hands that could silence a room and eyes that saw through every lie you tried to tell. She lived alone in a Victorian house on the edge of town, surrounded by rose gardens that she tended with religious devotion. I loved her, but I also feared her. There were rooms in that house I wasn't allowed to enter, questions I wasn't allowed to ask, photographs that would disappear from frames and reappear weeks later, as if they had never been gone. The summer of 1989 began like all the others. My mother dropped me off on the first day of June, barely looking at her own mother as she handed over my suitcase. "Behave yourself, Emma," she said, kissing my forehead. "I'll call when I can." She was gone before I could respond, her car disappearing down the dusty road like she couldn't escape fast enough. I watched until the dust settled, that familiar ache of abandonment settling into my chest. Grandmother Margaret was waiting on the porch, her face unreadable. "You've grown," she said, which was the closest thing to affection she ever offered. "Come inside. Lunch is waiting." The house smelled the same as it always did, lavender and old books, and something faintly medicinal, like the liniment she rubbed on her joints every night. I carried my suitcase up to the same room I'd slept in every summer, the small bedroom at the end of the hall, with its faded floral wallpaper and the window that looked out over the rose garden. But this time, something was different. There was a door across the hall that had always been locked, always forbidden. This time, it was slightly ajar. I should have ignored it. I should have gone downstairs and eaten my lunch and spent the summer the way I always did, reading books in the garden, walking into town for ice cream, counting the days until I could return to my real life. But I was 17, and 17-year-olds don't ignore open doors. They walk through them. The room was small and dark, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. It smelled stale and used, like a museum exhibit that no one had visited in years. There was a bed with a pink coverlet, a dresser with a mirror, and walls covered in photographs. Dozens of photographs, maybe hundreds. And in every single one of them was a girl who looked exactly like me. She had my dark hair, my angular face, my mother's eyes. She was smiling in some pictures, serious in others, always wearing the same small gold locket around her neck. The photographs spanned years. Baby pictures, school portraits, candid shots of birthday parties and Christmas mornings. In one, she stood in front of this very house, holding a bouquet of roses, squinting into the sun. I picked up a frame from the dresser. The girl looked about my age, maybe a year or two older. On the back, written in my grandmother's careful handwriting, were 4 words that made my blood run cold. Mary Hague Kelly, 1989. This year. This summer. But that wasn't possible. This room, these photographs, they were old. Preserved. Like a shrine to someone who no longer existed. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful footsteps that stopped just outside the door. I told you. My grandmother's voice was low, dangerous. That room was not for you. I turned, still holding the photograph. Who is she? Grandmother Margaret stood in the doorway, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes that looked like fear. Put that down, Emma. Who is Mary Hague Kelly? The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I watched my grandmother's face cycle through emotions I couldn't name. Anger, grief, something that might have been resignation. Finally, she spoke. She's your sister. Sister. The word echoed through my mind like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything I thought I knew. I had a sister. A sister named Mary who looked exactly like me, who had lived in this house, whose photographs filled a forbidden room like memories too painful to display, but too precious to destroy. That's not possible, I heard myself say. My mother would have told me. Someone would have told me. Grandmother Margaret stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click that felt like a prison lock engaging. She moved to the window and drew back the curtains, letting afternoon light flood the space. In that light, the room felt less like a shrine and more like a grave, beautiful, preserved, and unbearably sad. Sit down, Emma. She gestured to the bed. I sat, still clutching the photograph, unable to stop staring at the face that was mine but wasn't mine. Your mother had 2 daughters, Grandmother Margaret began, lowering herself into a chair by the window. Her hands were folded in her lap, but I could see them trembling. You were born first, in the spring of 1972. Mary came 14 months later. Twins would have been easier, I think. At least then you would have grown up together, known each other, been inseparable the way sisters should be. What happened to her? My voice was barely a whisper. I'm getting there. Be patient. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. Your father, his name was Thomas Kelly, and he wasn't a war hero. He wasn't dead, either. At least, he wasn't then. He was a drunk and a gambler, and the worst mistake your mother ever made. But she loved him. God help her. She loved that man until loving him nearly killed her. I tried to reconcile this with the photograph in my mother's jewelry box, the handsome soldier with the crooked smile. But even as I tried, I knew my grandmother's version was true. I had always known, somewhere deep in my bones, that my mother's story didn't add up. When you were 3 and Mary was 2, your father's debts caught up with him. He'd borrowed money from dangerous people, the kind who don't accept excuses or payment plans. They came to your house one night. Your mother wasn't home. She was working late, the way she always did, trying to keep food on the table while Thomas drank away every dollar she earned. Grandmother Margaret's voice had gone flat, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. But her eyes were alive with a pain that made me want to look away. The men took Mary. They said they'd give her back when Thomas paid what he owed. But Thomas couldn't pay. He'd never been able to pay. So he ran. He took you and ran in the middle of the night, left your mother to deal with the aftermath alone. He took me, but not Mary? You were there when he ran. Mary wasn't. She was already gone. I felt sick. The room was spinning, the photographs on the walls blurring into a kaleidoscope of faces that looked like mine, but belonged to a stranger. What happened to her? Did they? I couldn't finish the sentence. We don't know. The words fell like stones. We never found her. Your mother spent years searching, spent every penny she had hiring private investigators, following leads that went nowhere. The police were useless, just another missing child in a world full of missing children. Eventually, She had to stop, not because she wanted to, but because she had you to raise, and she couldn't do both. So she might be alive? Grandmother Margaret looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Anything is possible. Then why? I stood up, my voice rising. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did I grow up thinking I was alone when I have a sister out there somewhere? How could you keep this from me? Because your mother asked me to. There was no apology in my grandmother's voice, no regret. She wanted to protect you from a truth that would only bring you pain. She wanted you to have a normal life, or as close to normal as she could give you. And I agreed with her. Some burdens aren't meant for children to carry. I'm not a child anymore. No, she agreed quietly. You're not. I looked down at the photograph still in my hands. Mary Hague Kelly, my sister, the girl who had been stolen while I escaped, who had spent her life somewhere unknown while I grew up believing I was alone in the world. Why does this say 1989? I asked, pointing to the writing on the back. For the first time, something flickered in my grandmother's eyes, something that looked almost like hope. Because that's when the letter came. Before I could respond, she crossed to the dresser and opened the top drawer. From beneath a pile of neatly folded scarves, she withdrew an envelope, worn, creased, handled so many times that the paper had gone soft. 3 months ago, this arrived. No return address. Postmarked from San Francisco. She handed it to me. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The letter was short, written in careful, deliberate handwriting. My name is Mary. I was told I was adopted, but I have reason to believe that isn't true. I've been searching for my birth family for 2 years. If you're reading this, if you're the Margaret Hague I've been looking for, please contact me. I need to know the truth. I need to know where I came from. Below the message was a phone number and an address in San Francisco. I looked up at my grandmother. Have you called her? No. Why not? Because I needed to be sure. I needed to wait for you. For me? What do I have to do with this? Grandmother Margaret took my hands in hers. Her grip was stronger than I expected, desperate almost. Because if this girl is really Mary, if she's really your sister, then you're the only one who can bring her home. Your mother, she's fragile, Emma. She spent 16 years trying to bury this pain, and if we open that wound and it turns out to be nothing, a scam, a mistake, false hope, it will destroy her. But you're young. You're strong. You can handle the truth, whatever it turns out to be. I stared at her, the weight of what she was asking settling over me like a shroud. You want me to find her? I want you to try. That night, I lay awake in my small room, listening to the old house creak and settle around me. The photograph of Mary sat on my nightstand, her face illuminated by moonlight streaming through the window. We had the same eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same way of tilting our heads when we were thinking. Somewhere out there, maybe in San Francisco, maybe somewhere else entirely, was the other half of me, the sister I'd never known, the girl who had been stolen while I slept safely in my father's arms. I thought about what it would mean to find her, the questions she would have, the anger she might feel toward a family that had lost her, that had given up, that had let her spend 16 years believing she was someone else's child. But I also thought about what it would mean to bring her home, to give my mother back the daughter she'd mourned, to become the family we were always meant to be. Let me ask you something, and I really want you to think about this. Maybe even leave your answer in the comments below. If you discovered that your entire life had been built on a lie, that the family you thought you knew had been hiding something this enormous, would you want to know the truth? Or would you prefer the comfortable fiction you'd always believed? Think about it. Tell me in the comments. Because I'm about to show you what I chose, and it changed everything. I picked up the letter from my grandmother and read the return address one more time. San Francisco, 600 miles away. An entire world away from this small town and its carefully preserved secrets. I was going to find Mary Hague Kelly, and I was going to bring my sister home. 2 days later, I was on a Greyhound bus heading south, watching the Oregon landscape blur past my window like a dream I couldn't quite hold on to. My grandmother had given me $300 in cash, a photograph of Mary, and the address from the letter. She'd also given me something else, a piece of information she'd kept secret even from my mother. If this girl is really Mary, she'd said as I boarded the bus, she'll have a birthmark. A small one, shaped like a crescent moon, just below her left ear. Mary was born with it. It's the one thing that can't be faked. I'd nodded, tucking the information away like a talisman. A crescent moon. A mark that would prove everything. The bus ride took 14 hours. I spent most of it staring out the window, trying to imagine what I would say when I finally met her. Hi, I'm your sister. You were kidnapped when you were 2. Our mother never stopped loving you. But every version sounded hollow, rehearsed, inadequate for the magnitude of what I was about to do. San Francisco in summer was nothing like the gray, misty city I'd imagined. It was alive with color and noise and people moving in every direction, all of them with somewhere important to be. I felt small and provincial, my rural Oregon upbringing suddenly obvious in the way I stared at the tall buildings and the cable cars rattling past. The address from the letter led me to a narrow house in the Mission District, painted a cheerful yellow that seemed to mock the gravity of my errand. I stood on the sidewalk for what felt like hours, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the neighbors could hear it. Finally, I climbed the front steps and rang the bell. The woman who answered was not Mary. She was older, maybe 40, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a loose bun. Can I help you? I'm looking for Mary Kelly. I mean, the person who sent a letter to Margaret Hague? About 3 months ago. The woman's expression shifted, becoming guarded. Who are you? My name is Emma. Emma Hague. I pulled the letter from my pocket, showed it to her. My grandmother received this. I think Mary might be my sister. For a long moment, the woman just looked at me. Then something in her face softened, not quite welcoming, but no longer suspicious. You'd better come inside. Her name was Carol, and she ran a group home for young adults aging out of the foster care system. Mary, she explained, had lived there for the past 2 years. She was a difficult case, Carol said, pouring tea in her cramped kitchen while I sat at a table covered in paperwork. Bounced around foster homes for most of her life. Behavioral problems, trust issues, all the things you'd expect from a kid with her background. But underneath all that, she was brilliant. Determined. She saved money from 3 different jobs to hire that private investigator who found Margaret's name. Is she here? Can I see her? Carol set down the teapot. Her hands, I noticed, were trembling slightly. Mary left 2 weeks ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. Left? Where did she go? I don't know. She received a phone call one night. Wouldn't tell me from who, and the next morning she was gone. Left a note saying she'd found what she was looking for and not to worry about her. But that doesn't make sense. If she found what she was looking for, why wouldn't she contact my grandmother? Why wouldn't she? Emma. Carol's voice was gentle but firm. There's something you need to understand about Mary. She spent her whole life being lied to, being passed from family to family like an unwanted package. When she started searching for her birth parents, I think she hoped she'd find a simple answer. A mistake. An adoption that was supposed to be temporary, loving parents who'd been searching for her too. But the truth is rarely that simple. And when Mary uncovered the truth about how she was taken, about the circumstances of her disappearance. What did she find out? Carol looked away, toward the window, as if the answer was written somewhere in the San Francisco skyline. Your father, Thomas Kelly. He's not dead, Emma. He's alive. And he's been living in Portland for the past 12 years. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, suddenly dizzy. That's impossible. My mother said. Your mother lied. Or maybe she believed the lie. Maybe she needed to believe it. Carol turned back to me, her expression full of a sympathy that made me want to scream. Mary found him. The private investigator tracked him down. He's been living under a different name, working as a mechanic in Southeast Portland. Less than an hour from where you grew up. I tried to process what she was telling me. My father, alive, living in the same city as my mother, as me, for over a decade. Close enough to reach out. Close enough to know us. And he'd chosen to stay hidden. Why would Mary go to him? After what he did? Because she wants answers. And Thomas is the only one who knows what really happened that night. He's the only one who knows where those men took her, how she ended up in the foster system. Why no one ever came looking for her. I stood up so quickly my chair fell backward. I need to find her. Before she does something she can't take back. Emma, wait. But I was already moving, already running toward the door. My sister was out there, alone, confronting the man who had destroyed our family. The man who had let her be taken while he ran with me. I had to stop her. I had to save her. The bus ride back to Portland was agonizing. Every mile felt like a lifetime. Every stop a personal insult. I kept trying to imagine what Mary was feeling. The rage, the betrayal, the desperate need for answers that had driven her to track down the father who had abandoned her. I understood that need. I felt it too, burning in my chest like a fire that wouldn't be extinguished. All those years of believing my father was a dead hero, of treasuring that photograph, of mourning someone who wasn't worth mourning. My mother had lied to me. My grandmother had lied to me. And somewhere in Portland, the source of all those lies was living a quiet life under a different name, probably thinking he'd gotten away with it. I arrived at the bus station at midnight and took a taxi to the address Carol had given me, a duplex in a rundown neighborhood, with peeling paint and a yard full of dead grass. The windows were dark. There was no sign of life. I paid the driver and waited until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I approached the house. The front door was unlocked. That should have been my first warning. Nobody in Portland left their door unlocked, especially not in a neighborhood like this. But I was too focused on finding Mary to think about what that might mean. I stepped inside, fumbling for a light switch. My hand found one, and the room flickered into harsh fluorescent visibility. It was a mess. Not the mess of normal living, but the mess of a struggle. Furniture overturned, papers scattered across the floor, a lamp lying broken in the corner. And on the wall, written in what looked sickeningly like blood, were 3 words. Mary was here. I stumbled backward, my stomach heaving. This wasn't what I'd expected. This wasn't anything I'd prepared for. Hello. My voice echoed through the empty house. No response. I moved through the rooms like a sleepwalker, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. In the kitchen, more destruction, broken dishes, a table flipped on its side, a chair with ropes still tied to its legs. In the bedroom, a mattress slashed open, stuffing scattered like snow. But no bodies. No blood except for what was on the wall. On the nightstand, I found a photograph. A family photograph, old and faded. A man, a woman, and 2 little girls, standing in front of a house I recognized. My grandmother's house. Thomas Kelly was in this photograph, younger but unmistakable. And so was my mother. And so were we, Mary and me, barely distinguishable from each other, dressed in matching dresses, squinting into the sun. We had been a family once. Before everything fell apart, I heard a sound behind me and spun around, my heart hammering. A man stood in the doorway. He was older than the photograph, gray-haired, weathered, with deep lines around his eyes. But the crooked smile was the same. The man who should have been dead. "Hello, Emma," said Thomas Kelly. "I've been waiting for you." I couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. He stepped into the room, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I know what this looks like, but I need you to listen to me. I need you to understand. Where's Mary?" I finally managed. "What did you do to her?" "I didn't do anything." His voice cracked. "I tried to protect her. I've been trying to protect both of you for 17 years. Protect us? You ran. You took me and left her with those men." "I didn't leave her." Thomas moved closer, his eyes pleading. "I would never leave her. I loved her, Emma. I loved both of you more than anything in the world." "Then what happened?" He sank onto the ruined mattress, his head falling into his hands. "Those men, they weren't collectors. They weren't just after money. They were part of something bigger, something I didn't understand until it was too late. They wanted Mary specifically. They'd been watching her, waiting for the right moment. The debt was just an excuse. Why would anyone want a 2-year-old child? Because of who she was. Because of what she could become." He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw tears streaming down his face. "Your mother doesn't know? She's never known. But Mary wasn't mine, Emma. She wasn't your mother's biological child." The words didn't make sense. They were sounds without meaning, syllables that my brain refused to assemble into coherent thought. "What are you talking about?" "Mary was born to another woman. A woman who gave her to your mother when she was 3 days old. A woman who made us promise to keep her safe, to never tell anyone where she came from. But someone found out. Someone always finds out. I shook my head, denial rising like bile in my throat. No, no, that's not possible. I've seen photographs. Mary looks exactly like me. We're sisters. You are sisters. Thomas stood, crossing to a closet in the corner of the room. He pulled out a shoebox, handed it to me. But not the way you think. Open it. Inside the shoebox were documents, birth certificates, medical records, letters written in a language I didn't recognize. And at the bottom, a photograph of a woman I'd never seen before. She had dark hair and angular features. She looked like Mary. She looked like me. Her name was Elena. Thomas said quietly. She was your mother's sister. The story Thomas told me that night was almost impossible to believe. And yet, as he spoke, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed began falling into place. My mother's constant fear. My grandmother's secrets. The locked room and the forbidden questions. Elena Hague had been the older sister, the brilliant one, the daughter who left Waverly Falls at 18 and never looked back. She'd traveled the world, studied at universities in Europe, worked for organizations my grandmother refused to name. By the time she was 25, she'd made enemies, powerful people who saw her as a threat. Elena discovered something, Thomas explained. Something that people would kill to keep hidden. She never told Diana what it was. She said the less we knew, the safer we'd be. But when she became pregnant, she knew she couldn't keep the baby. Whoever was hunting her would find the child eventually, use it as leverage, or worse. So she gave Mary to my mother? It was supposed to be temporary. Elena was going to fix whatever she'd gotten mixed up in, clear her name, come back for her daughter. But months turned into years, and there was no word. We started to hope that maybe she'd forgotten about us, that maybe we could raise Mary as our own. But the people hunting Elena, they found us. Thomas's voice hardened. They tracked Elena's sister. They discovered Mary existed. And they came to take her back. Take her back where? I don't know. I've spent 16 years trying to find out. He looked at me with an expression of desperate honesty. When they came that night, I grabbed you and ran. Not because I loved you more than Mary, but because I knew if I tried to save both of you, they'd kill us all. It was an impossible choice, Emma. The kind of choice no father should ever have to make. I wanted to hate him. Part of me still did. But I could also see the weight of that night pressing down on him. Could see how it had aged him beyond his years. Where did you go? Everywhere. Nowhere. I kept moving, kept you hidden, kept waiting for them to find us. But they never did. They had what they wanted. His jaw clenched. Eventually, I brought you back to your mother. Left you on her doorstep with a note explaining everything. Then I disappeared, because I knew if I stayed, I'd lead them right to you. My mother, she knows the truth? Some of it. Not all. I think she spent years convincing herself that I'm the villain, that I'm the reason Mary was taken. It's easier than accepting that her own sister's choices brought this down on us. I thought about my mother, her perpetual exhaustion, her haunted eyes, the way she never quite looked at me when she said goodbye. Had she known, all this time, that her sister's secrets were the real cause of our broken family? Elena, I said. Is she still alive? I don't know. I've never been able to find her. Thomas stood, moving to the window, staring out at the dark street. But Mary is. She's alive, Emma. I saw her 2 days ago. My heart lurched. Where? She came here. Found me the same way she found your grandmother. Through sheer determination and a refusal to give up. She wanted answers. I gave her what I could. He turned back to me. But she wasn't satisfied. She said she was going to finish what Elena started. She said she was going to find the people who took her and make them pay for stealing her life. And you let her go? Alone. I tried to stop her. Look around you. Emma, do you think this is what a pleasant conversation looks like? Your sister is strong. Stronger than I ever imagined. But she's also angry, and anger makes people reckless. I looked at the destruction around us with new eyes. This wasn't what I'd assumed. This wasn't evidence of violence against Mary. It was evidence of a fight she'd won. Where did she go? Thomas pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. She left this. Said if anyone came looking for her, to give them this address. I think she's hoping you'll follow. I took the paper. An address in Seattle. A different city, but close. Drivable. She wants me to find her. I think she's counting on it. Thomas put his hand on my shoulder, the first time he'd touched me since I was 3 years old. Be careful, Emma. Whatever Elena discovered, whatever Mary thinks she's going to accomplish, these aren't people who play by the rules. They've been operating in the shadows for decades. They won't hesitate to add 2 more bodies to the list. I should have been afraid. I was afraid. But I was also something else, determined. My sister had been stolen from me before I ever had a chance to know her. Now she was out there, fighting against forces neither of us fully understood. She wasn't going to fight alone. I left Thomas's house at dawn, heading for the bus station. Seattle was 4 hours away. Somewhere in that city, Mary was waiting. And this time, I wouldn't be too late. Seattle was cold and gray, the summer sun hidden behind clouds that seemed to press down on the city like a weighted blanket. The address Mary had left led me to an industrial district near the waterfront, a neighborhood of warehouses and shipping containers, where seagulls circled overhead and the smell of salt and diesel hung heavy in the air. The building I was looking for was nondescript, a concrete cube with no windows and a single steel door. There was no signage, no indication of what might be inside. Just a small camera mounted above the entrance, its red light blinking in steady rhythm. I approached the door. Before I could knock, it swung open. Mary stood in the doorway. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, really looked, taking in the similarities and differences, the shared features, and the unique expressions. She was taller than me by maybe an inch. Her hair was shorter, cut in a practical bob that framed her angular face. And there, just below her left ear, was a small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. You came, she said. Of course I came. My voice was steadier than I expected. You're my sister. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or hope. She stepped back from the doorway. Then you'd better come in. We have a lot of work to do. The inside of the warehouse was a revelation. Computers lined the walls, their screens displaying streams of data I couldn't begin to decipher. Maps covered every available surface, connected by strings of red thread like a detective's crime board. And in the center of it all, sitting at a bank of monitors, was a woman I'd never expected to see. She was older, her hair streaked with gray, her face lined with years of hard living. But I recognized her instantly from Thomas's photograph. Elena Hague, my mother's sister. Mary's birth mother. Hello, Emma, she said, rising from her chair. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you. I looked between Elena and Mary, my mind reeling. You're alive. Thomas said he didn't know. Thomas didn't know. No one knew, except for a few people I trusted with my life. Elena moved toward me, her movements slow and deliberate, like she was approaching a wild animal. I had to disappear. Completely. It was the only way to keep everyone safe. Safe from what? Everyone keeps talking about these people, these enemies, but no one will tell me who they actually are. Elena and Mary exchanged a look, a silent communication that spoke of conversations I hadn't been part of, plans I hadn't been included in. Come, Elena said, gesturing toward the screens. Let me show you what I've spent 20 years fighting. What she showed me was almost too vast to comprehend. A network of corporations and government agencies, connected by invisible threads of money and power. Shell companies that existed only on paper. Politicians who had been compromised, their strings pulled by puppet masters in the shadows. They call themselves the Foundation, Elena explained. They've existed for decades, maybe centuries. Their goal is simple: control. Control of information, of resources, of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what's possible. They recruit the powerful and the desperate, and they eliminate anyone who threatens their dominance. And you threaten them? I discovered their existence by accident. A financial investigation that led to places it wasn't supposed to go. When they realized I knew, they tried to recruit me. When I refused, they tried to eliminate me. Taking Mary was their way of sending a message. I turned to Mary, who had been silent throughout Elena's explanation. But they didn't keep you. You ended up in foster care. They kept me for 2 years, Mary said quietly. Training me, conditioning me, trying to turn me into one of their assets. When I was 4, someone helped me escape. A woman who worked for them but had grown a conscience. She left me at a fire station with nothing but the clothes on my back. And you spent your whole life not knowing any of this. I knew something was wrong. I knew I was different. I had skills I shouldn't have had, languages I could speak without knowing how I learned them, instincts that normal children don't possess. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It wasn't until I started searching for my birth family that the memories began coming back. Fragments at first, then more. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. This was so much bigger than a family secret. This was conspiracy on a global scale, and my family was somehow at the center of it. What do you want from me? I asked finally. I'm not like you. I don't have special training or recovered memories. I'm just me. Elena knelt in front of me, taking my hands in hers. You're exactly what we need, Emma. You're normal. Invisible. The Foundation has no idea you exist. While Mary and I have spent years as targets, you've been living quietly beneath their radar. You want to use me. I want to give you a choice. Elena's grip tightened. Help us expose the Foundation. Help us bring them down and free everyone they've trapped in their web of control. Or walk away. Go back to your life. Pretend none of this ever happened. I won't force you into a war you didn't choose. I looked at Mary, my sister, my flesh and blood, the girl who had been stolen while I escaped. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't read, waiting for my answer. I thought about my mother, working herself to exhaustion to support a family built on lies. I thought about my grandmother, keeping secrets in locked rooms, carrying burdens she should have shared. I thought about Thomas, spending 16 years in hiding because he tried to protect his daughters. All of them, broken by the Foundation's reach. All of them, waiting for someone brave enough to fight back. Tell me what I need to do. The plan was audacious, perhaps insane. The Foundation was holding a private gathering in 3 days' time, bringing together their most powerful members under the guise of a charity gala in downtown Seattle. Elena had spent years positioning assets, gathering intelligence, waiting for exactly this opportunity. Their security is formidable, but not impenetrable, she explained, spreading architectural blueprints across the table. Mary will enter through the service entrance, posing as catering staff. I'll be monitoring from a mobile command center 2 blocks away. And you, Emma, you'll be our eyes inside the main event. Inside, how am I supposed to get an invitation to a gala for billionaires and power brokers? Mary smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. You're not going as a guest. You're going as entertainment. The piano. Of course. My grandmother had insisted on lessons from the time I was 5, calling it an essential skill for any proper young lady. I'd resented it then, preferring books and daydreams to hours of scales and arpeggios. Now, apparently, it was going to help bring down a shadow organization. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Elena drilled me on the layout of the venue, the faces of key Foundation members, the codes Mary and I would use to communicate. Mary taught me self-defense basics, how to throw a punch, how to escape a grab, how to use my size and apparent harmlessness as weapons in their own right. At night, when the training stopped, Mary and I would talk. Really talk, for the first time. She told me about her years in foster care, the families who had tried and failed to reach the wounded child inside her. I told her about growing up with our mother, the loneliness of being an only child who'd always sensed she was incomplete. Did you ever feel it? I asked her one night, as we sat on the warehouse roof watching the city lights. That something was missing. Every day. She was quiet for a long moment. I used to dream about you. Not you specifically. I didn't know you existed, but a presence. Someone who should have been there but wasn't. I thought I was imagining things. Now I know. Know what? That family isn't just blood. It's the empty space where someone should be. It's the ache that never goes away, no matter how hard you try to fill it. I reached out and took her hand. She tensed, then relaxed. We're going to make this right, I said. All of it. The night of the gala, I was terrified. I sat at the piano in the corner of a grand ballroom, my fingers moving automatically through classical pieces while my eyes scanned the crowd for familiar faces. The Foundation's members were exactly as Elena had described, polished, powerful, exuding an air of casual cruelty that made my skin crawl. I spotted several of them throughout the night. A senator who was supposed to be a champion of the people. A tech CEO whose products were in every home. A philanthropist whose charitable foundation masked something far darker. And then I saw him. He was older, heavy-set, with cold eyes that seemed to catalog everyone they touched. Gerald Morrison, the foundation's chairman, the architect of their century of control. According to Elena, he was the key. The documents on his private server could expose everything. Mary's voice crackled through the tiny earpiece hidden in my ear. I'm in position. Beginning extraction now. I kept playing, kept smiling, kept pretending to be exactly what I appeared. A hired musician, beneath notice, invisible. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. Through my earpiece, I could hear Mary's progress. The click of locks being picked, the soft beep of security systems being bypassed. Elena's voice providing guidance, warning of approaching guards, coordinating the timing down to the second. And then, disaster. Abort. Elena's voice was sharp with fear. They know we're here. Mary, get out now. I'm almost there. Now. I saw it happen from across the ballroom. A commotion near the service entrance. Men in dark suits converging, shouts echoing off the marble walls. The guests began to murmur, confusion rippling through the crowd like a wave. I had to do something. Had to help. I stood from the piano, my decision made before I even realized I was making it. Excuse me, I said loudly, stepping into the center of the ballroom. I have an announcement to make. Every eye turned to me, including Gerald Morrison's. My name is Emma Hague. I continued, my voice somehow steady despite my hammering heart. And I know what all of you really are. The silence was absolute. I saw Morrison's face shift from confusion to recognition to something that looked almost like amusement. Brave, he said, stepping toward me. Foolish, but brave. Your aunt trained you well. She trained me to fight, but she also taught me something else. I held up my phone, displayed to the room. Everything, every document, every transaction, every name, is uploading to a dozen different servers right now. Journalists, law enforcement, foreign governments. By morning, there won't be a shadow deep enough to hide in. Morrison's amusement faded. You're bluffing. Am I? I smiled, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Mary got what she came for. This was never about stealing your secrets, Mr. Morrison. It was about making sure you couldn't bury them. Behind me, I heard the doors burst open. Not Foundation security, police, federal agents, faces I'd seen in Elena's briefings. The cavalry, arriving exactly on schedule. Mary appeared at my side, breathing hard but triumphant. We did it. We did it together. In the chaos that followed, the arrests, the accusations, the members of the Foundation turning on each other in desperate attempts at self-preservation, Mary and I slipped away. Elena was waiting in the mobile command center, tears streaming down her face. It's over, she whispered. After all these years, it's finally over. The autumn of 1989 was supposed to be the autumn I started senior year, applied to colleges, and dreamed about escaping Waverly Falls. Instead, it became the autumn of new beginnings. Beginnings I never could have imagined that summer when I first walked through my grandmother's forbidden door. The Foundation crumbled faster than anyone expected. Morrison and a dozen of his key members were arrested within the first week. More followed as documents emerged, implicating politicians and business leaders across the country. Some fled, some turned informant, some took their own lives rather than face justice. But the shadow organization that had controlled so much for so long was finally, irrevocably, exposed. I returned to Waverly Falls in October, Mary at my side. We drove up the long driveway to my grandmother's house together, neither of us speaking, both of us terrified of what we would find. My mother was waiting on the porch. She looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow, as if the weight of years had finally compressed her. But when she saw Mary, saw the face that was almost a mirror of her own daughter's, she made a sound I'd never heard before. Not a word, not a sob. Something deeper, more primal, like a wound finally being acknowledged. Mary. She said the name like a prayer. My Mary. Mary hesitated, years of anger and abandonment warring with something softer, something I'd seen growing in her over the past weeks. Then she moved forward, and my mother opened her arms, and they came together in an embrace that seemed to contain 17 years of lost time. I watched them, tears streaming down my own face, and felt something inside me finally heal. Elena didn't come with us to Waverly Falls. She had her own battles to fight, her own demons to face. But she promised to stay in touch, to be part of the family she'd been forced to leave behind. And Thomas, our father, the man who had made an impossible choice and spent years hiding in its shadow, was beginning to reach out, slowly, carefully. It would take time, maybe years, maybe a lifetime. But for the first time, the path to reconciliation seemed possible. My grandmother stood on the porch, watching the reunion with an expression I couldn't quite read. I climbed the steps to stand beside her. "You knew," I said quietly. "All those years, you knew more than you let on." "I knew enough to be afraid," she admitted. "And fear made me careful. Perhaps too careful." She looked at me, her eyes bright with tears she was too proud to shed. "You did what I never had the courage to do, Emma. You demanded the truth, no matter the cost. I just followed where the truth led me. That takes more courage than you know." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Your mother is going to need you both. The road ahead won't be easy." I looked at my mother and my sister, still locked in their embrace, still making up for lost time. I thought about everything we'd been through, the lies and the secrets, the danger and the pain, but also the love that had survived it all, the bond that couldn't be broken no matter how hard the foundation tried. "I know," I said, "but we're going to walk it together. That's what families do." The summer of 1989 was supposed to be the summer I became myself. And in a way, it was just not the way I expected. I became a sister, a daughter, a niece, a warrior in a battle I never asked to fight. I discovered that truth is more powerful than secrets, that love is stronger than fear, and that the family you think you know is often just the beginning of the family you're meant to become. Mary Hague Kelly. That name changed everything. It led me to a sister I never knew I had, a father I'd been told was dead, an aunt who had sacrificed everything to protect us, and a conspiracy that had shaped our lives from the shadows. But more than that, it led me home. And now, when I look at my sister's face, the face that mirrors my own but carries its own unique light, I know that everything I went through was worth it. Every moment of fear, every painful revelation, every impossible choice. Because we found each other. Because we're together. Because the truth, no matter how devastating, set us free. If you've made it this far, you understand something important. You understand that the secrets we keep don't protect us. They imprison us. You understand that the only way to heal is to shine a light into the darkest corners and refuse to look away. Wherever you are, whatever secrets you're carrying, I want you to know you're not alone. Your truth matters. Your story matters. And if this story touched you, share it. Subscribe to this channel. Because somewhere out there is someone who needs to hear that their family's secrets don't have to define their future. Someone who needs to know that it's never too late to find the ones we've lost. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying until the end. This is Emma Hague, signing off. But not goodbye, never goodbye. Just see you soon.